Hello, beautiful people. Hopefully, everyone will be able to hear me all right. Hopefully, the mic is working as it should. The video signal is coming through as it should. Please let me know. There will be a lot of throat clearing and rambling going on in the course of this. It's going to be an interesting stream, I believe. I should say at the outset that this is by no means just about France. We're going to start with France, which I've been looking at quite a bit, and we're going to consider it against the background of all these other elections that have appeared out of the blue. That it's my view, at any rate, there was no need to have at this precise moment. Remember, we're talking about people who arguably are willing to arrange, but this is all speculation, ladies and gentlemen. Do not take my word for any of this. Follow your government authorities, your medical authorities, everyone else. All you're going to hear tonight is sheer speculation. But it seems to me that when faced with the prospect of losing an election that they didn't want to lose, that our masters are perfectly willing to arrange all sorts of global health concerns and fortifications and other things of this nature. And so when I heard that, wow, just out of the blue, there's going to be an election on the 4th of fucking July in Britain. There's going to be one a few days later in France. It's just now about to happen. And we've got the business of everyone pretending that there's this sudden new revelation about Biden's fitness to lead the country, as though, wow, look at what we just saw. Suddenly this bright light was shined on something. We had no idea it was going on. I've been chewing on that for quite some time, and bouncing back and forth with some mutuals on Twitter. And Academic Agent has a particular view on what all this is likely to be. And it's not certainly a view that in general terms applied to current and historical events. It's certainly not a view that's limited to him. But I think in this case, he's approached it with insight. And I think he's generally on the right track. And so in trying to figure out what the hell's been going on with all of these elections, I've sort of, bounced back and forth with him a bit. I think he's going in the right direction. I've consulted with people who know more about France than I do. And then I've looked at this general background. So that by way of introduction, sorry, it's long-winded. This is going to be a stream about the French elections, but quite a bit more. The ideas and relationships that I'm going to sketch here, potential relationships, my speculation about them that I'm going to sketch here, it's wide-ranging. It's going to go kind of all over the place, and I'm going to have to refer to a bunch of notes and things. And it only really came together with me in discussion with the frog earlier today. So please do follow this channel, Semiagog. Please follow the other channel, A Safer Space, with all kinds of old content. It's on YouTube as well. Both are on YouTube. You can follow me on Odyssey. You can follow me on Twitter, and I hope you will, X, whatever, on Telegram. I think I'm even on Gab. And also, please give me money. I really need money now. I'm screwed right now for reasons that should be clear to people who follow me over on Twitter. And so I need money. I need money. However, if you don't have it, if you're in the same situation I am in, don't worry about it. All the content here will continue to be made available, as it always has been, for free. And if you're the kind of person who wants to, oh, by the way, shout out to Confusion and Delay, who is still helping me out, and all my channel supporters, all of the credit and none of the blame. They are the best of the best. But for those of you who feel quite reasonably that you need to get something for your money other than my rambling, my science fiction book, Vinculum, you can pick it up over on Amazon. There are links in the description below. It's set in the year 2076. A kind of book thief in pursuit of a rare text attempts to get his hands on it while being pursued by remorseless corporate hitmen and a sect of esoteric assassins. A little bit of a cyberpunk vibe. And you can pick up my poems. I do not apologize to those of you who do not appreciate poetry. Glad you're here, but for the superior sort of human being, you can pick this up over on Amazon. Link in the description below. Cinders from the Bloomery of Youth. Okay, so let's get started on this thing. First off, France. What do we have going on? We have this woman, Marine Le Pen, who comes from Brittany. Her father was, of course, a famous and putatively far right figure with this party called Front National. And over the years, he was kept at bay. Marine Le Pen came in and began to do a kind of repositioning of the party. I think it reached a kind of climax in 2015, but it was probably going on and part of a plan for much longer, where she very meticulously removed people who had beliefs or rhetoric that they that they espoused that were not acceptable to the general public. She's gone to considerable pains to clean up her party to make it acceptable in a kind of move to the center. And she's tried to get into office before, as those of us who follow, quote unquote, right-wing politics around the world and French elections and these sorts of things, as all of us have seen. So she's been around for a long time, but no matter what she's done, she always seems to get blocked. But now, interestingly, against this background of the Brits calling an election that they didn't have to at all, and the French, Macron, there was this vote for the European Parliament, and Macron said, "Oh my God, I've got to call an election right now because the people don't want me." Okay. That's the first explanation. The second explanation is, it's really difficult for him to get things through working with the Parliament as it now stands. Well, I mean, I remember him pushing through a wildly unpopular change in the retirement age in France, which actually stranded me in that country for quite some time because the strikes were everywhere. It affected domestic flights. It affected trains. There were people in the streets everywhere. And even in France, where people protest, basically because their coffee wasn't hot enough, these were big protests. And yet he managed to get that through. And yet the prospect of a bunch of people being elected to the European Parliament, where, they can't really do anything anyway. It's not as though, decisions are handled in any way by the legislature there in any meaningful sense. But he's got to call an election. So I'm thinking, why? And what's this stuff with Biden? As I said, for those of you who are joining late, the whole idea here is that I was looking at these elections that, in my view, don't need to happen. People who have more experience with parliamentary systems, they're like, well, he's hoping to, to have the election now before she gains more support. And I'm like, yeah, except everything indicates that he's going to suffer another defeat, not directly in the office of presidency, but in the legislature. The French have legislative and presidential elections separately, as we'll see. So yeah, this all sort of started with me when I'm thinking, why the hell are they having these elections? And people will say, yeah, he wants to steal a march on them and get in there and have it detonated early before resistance can rise against him and the rest. And again, these are people whom, in my view, in my speculative view, whom I've seen go to great lengths without the slightest concern about draconian measures to lock down any sort of dissent and to fortify elections as they deem necessary. So one of the arguments that's been made is that, he's going to steal a march and let's take care of this fast. Let's take care of it now before it gets worse. And I've heard similar arguments expressed about the British elections, which just happened. I'm not going to say much about them other than to say, look at people like the Lotus Eaters, look at people obviously like Academic Agent. Go talk to the Brits who know more about it than I. In order to follow that, because the takes that I'm going to have about that are going to be derived from what I've heard them say, not being in Britain, not being a Brit bong, not knowing the political landscape there. And at the same time, I should say about France that, I had hoped to get a French guest on in order to be able to help me with this. I have consulted with a number of Europeans and French nationals to kind of put this picture together, but it's going to have mistakes. So, you're someone watching from France, bear with me. Malheureusement, I am just an arméloc, and my understanding of the situation there, insofar as it's even possible to have one, it's fucking France, for crying out loud, it's going to have holes in it. There are going to be errors that I've made and all the rest. So one of the excuses that I heard is to steal a march on them, have it happen more quickly before the opposition could consolidate more power. I've heard that about Britain too, and I don't buy it. Another explanation that I don't buy it, I should say, because it's pretty straightforward. Like, if there's a good chance that you're going to lose power in an election now, or at least have it diluted, then why give up power now instead of tenaciously clinging on to it for as long as you can? Why give up power now in the promise that you'll have more later? It doesn't make sense in the kind of political context, at least as I see it, that we're dealing with. Another explanation is that they want to leave. In the case of France, they want to leave Marine Le Pen's party holding the bag. So basically, this is a common thing. It happens all the time with what are called electoral cycles. That term should clue you into the dialectical nature of the switcheroo game that happens with the uniparty and its various pseudopods, its manifestations. What they often do is you'll have a Democratic administration or a Labor administration, and they'll get blocked in some ways, and it'll be a financial mess afterwards. And then the right wing, so-called, or the conservatives or the Republicans will come in, and they'll have an orgy of a different kind of spending, and they'll leave a big mess. Everyone leaves a big mess for the one that's incoming. They want to empty the treasury, like the king who has taken office, and then or the whomever, I guess a king would be born into it, but whomever the leader is comes into office, and the the treasurer takes him to the vault, and they open the door, and there are 4 pennies in the back corner. That's how this game is played. They gut and empty the financial resources before they move on. So one explanation I've heard that does circulate in the French press is that, basically France is screwed right now with all the money that was printed and all the problems with deindustrialization in Europe, turning off nuclear power, dumping money into Ukraine and military equipment, and the COVID stuff. So perhaps that's the reason. But again, to me, I'm not buying it. Apologies for the frog in my throat. These are the kind of explanations I hear, and so for me, they're not convincing. Well, academic agent, and I think he's right in this. I certainly think he's right in it at the current moment, given what I've seen, and that's part of what this discussion is about. He's like, look, it's very straightforward. There's shit going on with Israel, and Israel wants to get shit taken care of, and as a result, they're going to change horses in a number of respects. That's interesting to me. It's very interesting to me. So let's lay this out. Let's talk a little bit more about what's going on with France. So Marine Le Pen, let me pull up my notes here. For those of you who don't know, as I said, she comes out of the FN, the Front National, and she created a new version of it called the Rassemblement National, which gets translated as National Rally or National Reassembly. It's a rally. Not in the sense of having a rally, but to rally your troops, to reassemble them in order to move forward again. That seems to be the sense of it. So basically, the RN, the Rassemblement National, was formed in 2022 after the legislative elections that had just happened in France. And this organization has been chaired by Le Pen since its formation. Now, there's this young guy who is a protege of Le Pen's, who is said to, part of his classic origin story is that he came from the banlieue, the rundown sort of working class areas in France. And basically he became a president, I believe. Let me see. He was elected. Where is it? Where's Bardella? Yeah. Le Pen resigned as head of the National Rally, though I still think she chairs it. And forgive me if I get these details mixed up, because she had presidential ambitions. And so she turned over, well, apparently the party had an election, and Jordan Bardella was elected by party members by an overwhelming majority, 85 to 15% out of those who did vote for a new leader. And he's been in place ever since. He seems well-spoken. He's good looking. He's a young guy. And so if Le Pen does well in this second round of elections, gets an absolute majority, he could be the prime minister in France. And this is, in theory, what Macron is responding to. If he's forced as president to deal with a parliament that's dominated by a party that he doesn't get along with, he's not going to be able to get anything done. But the only reason any of that's happening is because he called an election after this ridiculous, pointless, doesn't matter at all election in the EU. So he's created this situation for himself. So if there's an absolute majority on the part of RN, Rassemblement National, then presumably Bardella would be the prime minister, and you could see Le Pen come into office as the president. They would come as a set. Now, with this last run, the first round, because in France there are 2 rounds for these elections. In the first round, the RN, I think they got, depending on whose numbers you look at, it's like somewhere between 33 and 34%. So they did very, very well. They came out first in line, or they were in the lead. And so now there's a second round. And immediately after the first round, when Le Pen did well, Gabriel Attal, who's the prime minister currently, who's part of Macron's crew, he came out and said that the left must stand together. As a Jew, and we'll come back to this, he said, as a Jew, we can't have one of these terrible right-wing parties in power. This guy seems to be of the globalist variety of Jewish person. He was previously a minister of education. His big thing seems to be laïcité, which is to say secularism, a state where all these different people will be welcome and will be able to enjoy a rich array of flavors at all the restaurants. So the first thing that happened after RN did well in the first round of the elections was this Attal guy comes out and he says, look, what we have to do is come together on the left in order to block them, which is something everybody in Europe is familiar with. It's been happening for a decade now, almost a decade, in order to basically ensure that there's no way that any right-wing party can come in and screw with the status quo. You're allowed center, left, and left. Those are your choices. So now we've got this business of the next election coming up in a day or two. I think it's just now. Where I am in the U.S., it's a little more than 24 hours away, or it's, tomorrow, Sunday, something like that. There is now, according to French law, a total cessation of online posting and news stories and the rest about it because the election is about to happen. But it does look like there is going to be some sort of that there has been some deal worked out in the background. So you've got the Rassemblement National, as I understand it. French people, feel free to jump in the comments and clarify things where I get it wrong, as doubtless I will here and there. So you've got the RN. They did best. I think you also you have the LFI. Let me see what that stands for. That's Mélenchon's party. It's La France Insoumise. I think that's like unsubmitted or rebellious France, right? France Invictus. And so, you also, after the first round of elections, the LFI, the party that Mélenchon stands behind, considered to be the far left. They've also got, I think, a grouping of other left-wing parties that are smaller, that are called the Popular Front or something, who are even further left, straight up Communist Party and this kind of stuff. And these guys had a big demonstration in the Place République in Paris, organized, as I said, by LFI. There are lots of Algerians and Palestinians and leftists and the usual rainbow people trans non-binary, whatever's, back scratchers, hanging with other leftists, and they're chanting the usual kinds of things like "whose streets, our streets," lots of Antifa breaking windows and that sort of thing. But in terms, we should just cover this since I'm over here as a parentheses. There's been a lot of talk about rioting and stuff, and from what I've seen, the rioting and the protests are not, for France, they're not really anything big. They are they're relatively minor. Most of them are small rioting and protests by French standards, maybe moving up into the beginning of medium-sized things. But yeah, so you've got the RN, Rassemblement National, and Le Pen, the so-called far right. You've got the LFI, among whom, or at the top of the pyramid there, in large part, you have Mélenchon, who's this major left-wing figure who's performed well in elections, though he didn't get into office. You've got the scattering of these other far-left parties, and then you have Macron's party. There are others, but these are the main players that are involved here. And Macron's used to be called En Marche, which is some shit like, ahead, forward, together, or something. Now he's called it, because, nothing is too much for Macron. He calls it the Renaissance Party. And anyway, so it looks like the Renaissance Party and the LFE and some of these fringe figures, something can be worked out between them in order to block Le Pen, because the idea is that she would be the worst of all possible things. And in support of that idea, just a few hours ago, right before the imposition of the shutdown, the cessation, the interdiction upon further press discussion in the immediate run-up to an election, it was announced that it's not really important, but it's a signal of a possible cooperation. There was a law passed in France back in December, which was supposed to deal with immigration problems, and it has some stuff about deportation in it. And there was this one particular bit of the law that kind of had some teeth. I mean, the whole thing had really been castrated, as you would expect. It's like, we're going to take care of immigration, but then it get passed through, the legislature, and probably had some kind of a judicial review too. I don't know, but in the end, it was pretty much toothless. But it did have this one bit that was something to do with a reduction of possible appeal opportunities for people who had been slated for deportation. And now over on the legislature website, or whatever, it says that particular law, or that's a part of, or that aspect of that law that's part of, is currently suspended. And then Macron's party came out and said, actually, what's happening here is that's right-wing fake news. We never did anything like that. The law hasn't been suspended, but as I'm told, you can go check, and it says, yes, it has been. So the way it was explained to me is that Macron is this equivocating asshole. And by the way, everyone should understand that the far left and the far right, as well as the actual left and actual right, just, basically everyone other than establishment bankers, they fucking hate Macron. That's an important thing to understand. Both the left and the right, they fucking hate him. And one of the reasons for it was explained to me. It's his expression, en même temps. He's always like, at the same time. So he'll say one thing over here, but he'll be like, but on the other hand. So he'll be like, it seems like that's what happened here. In order to form some kind of a coalition with the left, it seems likely that they said to him beforehand, or to his people beforehand, yeah, well, if you want us to work with you, we need to see a sign of good faith. We want to flood France with hostile migrants. You understand that that's important to us. So we need to see the stuff about deportation suspended so that we can throw a bone to the savages that we hope to mobilize on the streets. That's just how I see it. It's all speculation on my part. I love everyone. All people are human beings. All people are important. We're all God's children, and I love them. I love them. It's my fault. If I were in Scandinavia and got raped by a migrant, I too would apologize. So please don't hold any of this against me. So it seems like an en même temps kind of thing from Macron, where, they send a signal right before discussion shuts down in the run up to the election. They send a signal. Yeah, we suspended that law. Okay, will you stick with us with this upcoming election, and signal to your people and supporters that we have to block that we have to block Le Pen. En même temps, at the same time, on the other hand, no, we didn't do it. This is all a right-wing lie. It's fake news. We don't want to lose our right-wing voters and have them roll over to Le Pen's party, thinking that the sort of right aspects of the Renaissance party are beginning to crumble. So that's our background. What other stuff is a background? I already covered the stuff about the violence in the streets, the protests, and the rest. The protests don't seem like a big deal. There is some violence, though. I think that there was an RN candidate who was, I think it was, hopefully I got this right, over in Cherbourg, and she was attacked in a neighborhood, and she has since said that she would stand down. There have been a number of other attacks on candidates happening now in France. And they're not just with the Rassemblement National. They're also coming from the far left, and their attacks on Macron and Macron's party's people. So there is a good bit of that going on. So that's the situation. I do not know if Macron is going to be able to keep out Le Pen. And I guess this is a good point to shift. So I'm not going to make any predictions about the election. In fact, what I'm going to do here is discuss, well, if it goes this way, that is to say, if Le Pen comes into power, it will tend to support the hypothesis that I'm setting forth this evening. And we'll know in, I don't know, 24, 48 hours. If, however, Le Pen's party loses and Macron maintains power, it would tend to militate against, so to speak, my position here, which I will be laying out as all of this unfolds. Again, for people who are coming in late, I'll be talking about the French election, but I'm going to move on to other things. The situation in Europe, touch, peripherally, tangentially on the British election, the stuff with Biden going on, and more importantly, Russia, Iran, Israel, Ukraine, Hezbollah, this kind of block. We're going somewhere with all of this. So forgive me for being typically long-winded. So yeah, now I think we can kind of back up and look at this a little bit more broadly. Oh, one other thing. I know nothing about it. It's all just alleged. I'm not making any claims, but apparently there was some stuff in the first round that made it into the French press about voter fraud. Not much. What I did hear about was something going on with the embassy in Milan with French voters who are voting from abroad. So there may be some stuff going on about that. Oh, one last thing I should say relative specifically to the French election was that in the last legislative election, the one that just happened, for which this upcoming one in a day or so is going to be the second round, in which Rassemblement National did very well, 33, 34%. They had a particularly high voter turnout. So that's something to understand here. They had about 65%, but I've seen other numbers. So, go check it yourself. There are varying figures. I believe I have that right. Now, in the 2022 presidential election, to have a basis of comparison, they had a turnout of 74% in the first round and 72% in the second round. That's when, I believe, if I remember correctly, that's when we saw Le Pen and Macron go head-to-head last. And she was defeated, but there was a large turnout, 72%, so more than what we saw here. But in the last legislative election, remember that in France you have legislative and executive elections for the presidency. They only had a turnout of 48% in the first round and 46% in the second round. Also, from what I've seen, Le Pen's party's share of the vote in this legislative election compared to the last one has tripled. So not only do you have a 64%, 65% turnout this time and a 48% last time for the first round of the legislative elections. I might get these numbers wrong because I've been making lots of notes in preparation, but I think she went from 4 million votes to 12 million votes in the legislative election this time around. And I guess the one other thing that I should throw in here is, two things. People in France are fed up. They're absolutely fed up. Catholics who typically do not get involved in a lot of political stuff in France are now becoming much more actively involved. There are things like, priests getting their heads cut off and school teachers who are Catholic being murdered. So the Catholics are getting more involved, and they still have them. I've seen them in rural France, in the park with the husband and wife and the 6 or 7 children. They still exist. They have not entirely disappeared from most Catholic France. And as I said, everyone hates Macron. The left hate him because he's gone after the social support system. I also mentioned the thing of, I already mentioned the thing, I should say, of raising the retirement age from 62 to 64 in 2023, because he's breaking the social contracts. You don't have to agree one way or another with what social contracts are in place in France for retirement and the rest, but people have been working their entire lives planning for this, and now they just had it extended by 2 years. So they hate him. He's seen as a banker, if I remember correctly, a Rothschild banker, and a capitalist. So they call him extreme right. They're also upset that he is not assertive enough on Palestine's behalf. But the right hate him because, and others, centrists, just normal French people who aren't insane, they hate him because of the security situation, immigration, illegal immigration, crime, repeat offenders being released and doing horrible things over and over again. So yeah, security, law enforcement, and immigration. And they're disgusted by the fact that he permits, and in many respects seems to encourage, the ongoing degradation of everyone's living circumstances and the usual kind of anarcho-tyranny and lack of border enforcement that we're all familiar with. Now, some people like Alexander Mercouris in particular seems keen to frame the reaction in France, the French elections, as being related to the Ukraine war. And as best I can tell from all the French people I've talked to, they don't give a fuck. It's important to remember that they don't have the Anglosphere fear and hatred of the French, fear and hatred of the Russians. The French don't have any kind of particularly bad relationship with the Russians. It's just not, since the Crimean War, they're not allies. They are backing Ukraine, but the French people, they didn't grow up with this Cold War boogeyman. And they also have, they have a lot of leftists in France, a lot of labor organizations, a lot of communists who don't look upon, the whole historical background with Russia as being problematic in any way. So the French aren't really against Russia. They also learned their lesson with Napoleon. It's just their relationship with Russia has generally been very good. So, I think they're at the outset, they're like, yeah, well, I support Ukraine, whatever. We can send some of our shitty wheeled tanks and keep the Leclercs for ourselves. They're not pro-Russia, but they're not particularly against them. So, Ukraine is something that's far away. I don't tend to agree from what I've heard with God, what is his name? The Greek guy, Mercouris's assessment of this being people voting to show their dissatisfaction with the Ukraine war. That said, the Ukraine war does contribute to destabilization and concern, and it's something into which money is being poured. But that's the that's the basic picture. Oh, and I should also add, Bardella has said that if he gets into office, Jordan Bardella, who is the prime minister that will come into office, presumably if Rassemblement National does well in the second round of the elections, he has said that one of the first things he will do is review the finances of the French state, that he's going to audit them, which could create some concern on the part of the French government. So that's our background. There's a couple things there that I forgot to throw in. So now let's look at this background. What do we have going on here? Well, geopolitically, we have two major wars going on, no matter what you want to call them: police actions, a special military operation, police actions in Gaza or whatever. But you have Israel and you have Ukraine. And I can't get heavily into the Ukraine situation, but, for my Ukraine friends, I don't know if Charlemagne's here. I hope he is. I saw Raging Mandrill in the chat. My buddies, Prude's here. For my Geopol and Strategy Head friends, we all follow this closely. We know that the Ukrainian line is being pushed back now steadily. For those of us who've been watching this war for years now, I mean, do you guys remember when, Pisky or whatever was taken, and it was this tiny little movement, up to a road intersection through the heavily fortified lines that have been built up over, 8 or 10 years. There's very little movement. And you remember how many men had to be poured into Bakhmut. Prisons had to be emptied in order to make the taking of Bakhmut possible. But now what we've seen is this constant acceleration of movements on the front line in Ukraine. And it's due in large part, not solely, but among many other reasons. One of the issues is the lack of air defense, which means the Russians are in a position to just hammer the fuck out of the Ukrainians with these Fab 500s, Fab 1500s, now Fab 3000s. These big ass hosses that just, belly flop right onto buildings and turn them to rubble. There's not enough air defense to take care of Ukraine's needs. One of the reasons for the F-16s, we're told, is to make it possible for some of that air defense role to be taken by jets that are, in circulation in the skies, who can, do something to try to intercept missiles coming in. Well, that's Ukraine. But what about Israel? We have every reason to believe that Israel needs missiles, air defense missiles. Every time they empty the magazines on their iron domes, so to speak, we have to, pump another, like, last minute, I don't know, $500 billion worth of money to them to refill the hopper. And with the recent demonstration, relatively restrained demonstration on the part of Iran in reaction to the bombing of their consulate facilities, we've seen that, they could require quite a bit of air defense, and it's an open question whether they're going to have enough if they do initiate hostilities with Hezbollah. So, okay, work with me, people here of limited attention span. We just talked about what's going on in France, and we're going to come back to that in the context of Europe and other elections there, like Britain and the Netherlands with Geert Wilders, and we're going to come back to possibly Biden as well. But I wanted to jump over to the larger geopolitical situation. Ukraine war is going on, but it's looking bad for Ukraine. Very bad. It actually is. I'm not saying they're going to fold overnight, and I'm not suggesting in any way that they're not hardcore fighters who are serious and have been fighting hard for years. I'm not saying that. But it looks bad. And anyone who follows the situation over there, they don't need to be told by me. I'm just glossing it for those of you who don't. Meanwhile, we've got the stuff going on in Gaza, and Israel has constantly been talking about how, well, we're going to get ready. We're going after Hezbollah. We're going to head north to the border there. We have to recapture some area north of us in the northern part of Israel, because we've had all these displaced settlers and residents up there who are now refugees in other parts of Israel. It's screwing our economy. We have to do something. The Houthis bombing our ships or attacking ships that are coming up to the southern port, Eilat. Eilat? Yeah, not Ashdod, Eilat. The Eilat port, from what I saw, is either in serious financial trouble or actually did declare bankruptcy because it's not getting enough business. The Houthi threat has made it so that southern port is kind of screwed right now. And of course, there are huge economic problems in Israel, which we in the United States have been helping to paper over. But they've got huge amounts of their men have been called up for conscription. And, there are real problems. And so one of the things that they want to do is go after Lebanon. But as people who know much more about it than I have observed, going after Hezbollah is something very different than going after the much less formal militias in Gaza. And they haven't even had particular success with Gaza. Now, they have created their Philadelphia corridor, so they have overland cut off that area by Rafah from Egypt. And they've, just shattered the north of it, and they've pushed refugees all over the place, and, a lot of civilian deaths. But they have not decisively dealt with Hamas. So apparently what they want to do is deal with Hezbollah. This is not the place to get into the discussion of the whys or the wherefores, the practicality of it. or what their real calculation is in doing that. But I can say that my assumption and the best of my understanding at present is that they do want to do it. They do see it as existentially necessary, and they want to make it happen. But we're constantly hearing, well, soon, very soon, soon, very soon. Well, now it's necessary. Keep Ukraine in mind. Things are going badly there. Keep Israel in mind. Things are not going great for Israel there, and they need to do something. We're going to bring it all together. Bear with me. There was a major push, and it seemed to be like the State Department rainbow NGO type, National Endowment for Democracy type stuff. Now, I don't know if exactly that organization was involved, but as soon as you see shit cans full of people pouring into the streets in Israel over a period of months, if not a couple of years, with rainbow flags and Israeli flags screaming that, the trans people will be in a bad situation and it will be a terrible dictatorship and tyranny if Netanyahu isn't prosecuted and forced to step down. I've seen color revolutions before, and there's just no way that the same Biden administration that's inviting Benny Gantz to come over and talk to them, that seems to be trying to unseat Netanyahu, that's pushing, NGO protests in the streets. There's just no way that they're really fully supporting Netanyahu. Now, people will talk about, Biden's giving them bombs, Biden's letting them do it. Yes, there's a certain amount that he's going to permit, but it seems pretty clear that the Biden administration wants Netanyahu out, and Biden is concerned about re-election. Well, it looks like Netanyahu isn't out. It looks like he's not going to be pushed out. And I have to take him at face value. I think that Netanyahu truly does believe that he is the man for this crisis. He considers himself an Israeli patriot. He's a full-on Zionist. He doubtless wants to see, let us say, he wants to see Israel stabilized by removing the question of heterogeneous populations. And I believe he sees it, and many close to him, certainly those further to his right, they see it as an existential threat that has to be dealt with now. And I have hypothesized, you can go back and see some of my questions and discussion about that. I had a stream on Israel. I think it's been taken down on YouTube because I got a channel strike because someone said something about COVID just in passing, and the whole thing got taken down. But I believe you can see it over on BitChute and probably on Odyssey too. But the basic idea is, I think that there are two factions. Everybody likes to say, "Oh, the Jews around the world, they always work together." No, they're at odds. They're not at odds about wanting Israel to continue to exist, but they're at odds in terms of their vision for it. And it seems to me on one side, you have a serious Trotskyist, globalist, rainbow flag, rainbow colored dildo kind of group, like, the kind of rabbis who run Pornhub and these kind of people. And then you have hardcore, quote unquote, right-wing Zionists, the kind of people who will extrude figures like Laura Loomer, or presumably work with people like Tommy Robinson, and who, it's worth noting, seem to have an excellent relationship with Rassemblement National, and who, it seems, have an excellent relationship with politicians like Geert Wilders. Interesting. So on the one hand, you have the sort of globalist Biden, bring in as many Muslims as you possibly can, these kind of people, or like Sunak, or the perfect example is what's his name, Trudeau. That crew seems to really have a Trotskyist vision of diverse populations, and it has yielded real problems in the West, particularly for the quote unquote right-wing Israelis, because you see, how many there are Muslims, even Pakistani Muslims in Britain, more than one, who just now campaigned exclusively on the issue of Palestine and have been elected to the British Parliament. So, the sort of Netanyahu style, more right-wing Israeli Zionist nationalists are having real problems with the globalist ones. And I think that up till now, it's very likely that there has been real tension between the globalist faction and the Netanyahu faction. They've tried to push Netanyahu out. Biden, or the people with him, have seemed perfectly willing to try to do that, even though they on the surface say we're going to support Israel no matter what. And then there's the right-wing nationalists. These two are in competition, not in all areas, because they both want to see Israel continue to exist, and they certainly don't want to see a reduction in their minority ability to influence events, whether on behalf of Jews in particular countries or on behalf of either diaspora, so to speak, or on behalf of Israelis in Israel. But it doesn't mean that they're not in real competition. And so I've been thinking about this. What's going on? Well, the Israelis want to attack Hezbollah, but they're going to need more weapons. And it's going to suck if they have two wars going on at the same time. Now, what happened? We used to have another war. Remember that one in Afghanistan? Low intensity. It's a small thing, but we still have troops there. We're eventually going to pull out, but, we're there for 20 fucking years. And then what happens? We suddenly pulled out and made a horrible mess of it. Well, it seems quite clear in retrospect that that's because they knew they were about to go to war in Ukraine and they couldn't deal with that, especially deal with the kind of things that Russia would be able to do in terms of asymmetric escalation to U.S. forces in Afghanistan. Were they still there at the time that all the stuff got going with Ukraine? Excuse me. There's someone here saying Bach Precision, saying he's unsubbing. I don't engage the chat and I ramble on and on. Allow me to say goodbye. Goodbye. So, if for people who can't deal with rambling on and on, then I would have written you a shorter note, but I didn't have time. I'm attempting to put this picture out here. I haven't heard this take from anyone else, so if you don't have patience for it, take a long walk off a short pier. So you have a situation where we pulled out of Afghanistan in order to prepare for Ukraine. Now there's stuff going on in Ukraine. Ukraine seems to be all about globalist powers, the Biden family, Burisma, huge investments by BlackRock, purchasing farmland, energy deposits in the Black Sea, natural gas, oil, all this kind of stuff. So it seems to me that we may well, and I should add, we have this situation where there will be a need for arms and air defense and American reconnaissance, ISR assets, and all the rest if Israel does try to do something in Lebanon. Well, it would make sense to try to wind things down in Ukraine. But there's another reason why it would make sense now to wind things down in Ukraine if you're Jewish power brokers with strong influence on the U.S. Government. If you're a Jewish power broker, globalist or Zionist, and you believe that really at the end of the day, well, maybe we won't make as much money in Ukraine, but Israel will continue to exist. Well, maybe the time has come to back off a little bit on Ukraine. And it's not just because of air defense and ISR assets and everything else. Russia just went to North Korea and said to the North Koreans, hey, man, great to be with you. Thanks for the support. Thanks for sending millions of truckloads of 152 or 55. I can't remember if it's 155 or 152, but whatever the Warsaw Pact size is. Thanks for sending all those rounds, millions of them in freight containers. I really appreciate that. That's great. And you know what? Let's go ahead and sign what amounts to a defense pact where you'll put boots on the ground if I'm really threatened, and I'll put boots on the ground for you if you're really threatened. And in a certain sense, we'll draw North Korea under the Russian nuclear umbrella. That's a big deal. That's a big deal. Anyone who considers sending NATO troops into Russia, I mean, and then there's also the CSTO, the Collective Security Treaty Organization of Russia, which would presumably pull in other states to back Russia if there were a more formal NATO incursion into Ukraine. Well, that's all interesting, and everyone should bear it in mind. But what else is going on? What else is going on, dear friends? What else is going on? Isn't there something going on with Russia being in discussions with Iran to form a more formal alliance with them? Iran has been manufacturing all these high-tech drones, and in exchange, doubtless, Russia has been offering military technology that's of high value. What if they start to turn over those, S-400s and S-500s? What the other S-550? What if they provide better missiles to Iran as well? And we've also heard Russia saying that because the United States is providing these weapons to the Ukrainians, which are being used presumably with U.S. assistance in ISR and targeting, coordinate input and all the rest, to target Russians in Russia. Well, as Putin said, maybe we will have to send the weapons to countries that are at war with maybe we have to send them to countries that are at war with United States. Well, what if that starts to affect Israel? What if they go to Houthis? What if they go to Iranians? What if they go to Hezbollah? What if they go to whatever these Iraqi militias are now? What happens then? This could be a real mess for Israel, particularly if there is some sort of more formal alliance with Iran on the part of Russia. That would change the entire situation. Russia was fairly accommodating to Israel in all the stuff that's been going on in Syria. But if you've got a situation where the United States continues to up the game in Ukraine, right at the time when Israel needs to do something, well, that's a bigger problem, especially when I'm hearing in the background that Netanyahu really wants to go in to get Hezbollah, but they keep waiting. What are they waiting for? They're probably under pressure from the United States to wait until after the election. Well, if Biden stepped down before the election, wouldn't that change the calculus? And if there was something to really wind down the war in Ukraine in a way that was satisfactory to Russia, then you might have leverage over Russia in terms of how they dealt with Iran, in terms of backing them, what they would give their acquiescence to that Iran might consider doing. You might be able to put some leverage on that too. So you could almost wind down the Ukraine war and say it's a loss. But if Iran backs out and you guys do your north-south corridor and everything, and they stay out of it, and we get involved with this Hezbollah stuff, and Russia doesn't get directly involved, maybe or maybe not, Iran doesn't get directly involved, but we can be sure that Russia won't, then maybe they'd get some room to do something about Hezbollah. They'd probably have to dangle a pretty serious carrot for Iran. But Ukraine, a resolution of it in some fashion that Russia can construe as a victory, would definitely be, it's something to bargain with on the table with someone like Putin. So let's look at this stuff. I've checked with my buddy Mickey Petey, who is a Dutchman, and I wanted to ask him about what's going on with Geert Wilders, because I hadn't paid much attention to that. And it seems that Wilders has come into office. Rutte left and is going to be the head of NATO. NATO is about to switch out. Interesting. And Wilders can't seem to say enough that's praise about Israel. He just trips over his own dick constantly to talk about how great it is that that Israel exists and what a wonderful friend Israel is to the West. He has said, and I quote, if Israel falls, the West falls. He has said, we're Israel's biggest friends. And Wilders' party member called the Palestinians fake peoples. And everybody knows that Wilders' big thing is being anti-Islamist, as they put it. So he apparently, it's some guy who's head of Dutch intelligence who was made prime minister, and he's really the guy who's in charge over there. Apparently, Wilders is being ferried around, living in hidden locations because people have been trying to kill him forever, right? And so you've got Wilders, it seems to me, very clearly being a pro-Israel figure. And remember that for the Israeli right, and even to some extent now for the Trotskyist, globalist, Jewish left, they're all starting to see. I think the right wingers saw it for a long time, but the leftists were like, it doesn't matter, global revolution, rainbow dildos everywhere. They're starting to see that there are real problems with bringing in, that they've gotten to the point now. Well, you could construe it however you like. You could say on the one hand, they're like real problems with having too many Muslims. We need to get them out. That's probably the Israeli Zionist nationalist right-wing view. The other ones are probably like, okay, that's enough for now. Let's cap it, try to integrate them, change the power balance vis-a-vis the native population in each one of these countries, but actually stop it for now because it's getting a little bit too rough for us to do what we want to do. Wilders seems like that kind of figure. So let's come back to Le Pen. Well, what's interesting is we've got a quote from Le Pen. What was it? She said once upon a time that this was on the 29th of May, 2023. Le Pen said herself that the Front National, speaking in terms of political archaeology, the Front National has always been for the Constitution of the State of Israel and its security. So I guess I don't think she means the paper constitution. I think the translation there is that it's for, she's always been for the existence of Israel and its stability and security. And you know what else is interesting? The European governments, like I checked with Wilders, and Wilders has not really come out and said he's against Ukraine. There's a 10-year treaty, I think, that was done some months back that Wilders was against with Ukraine. He's not into the treaty, but he says we should support Ukraine anyway. Hang tight on that. Le Pen has said that if a Rassemblement National were to come into power and Macron were to remain the president, so they would be required, Bardella and Macron, Bardella as prime minister, Macron as president, would be required to work together. Le Pen said that there could be no troops sent to Ukraine, right? And there have been accusations in the past that Le Pen is pro-Russian, but that, as best I can tell, that's just smearing that has to do with the fact that she got debanked from everyone else and had to work with some banks based in Russia just to be able to cash checks. But whatever that's worth, it seems to me that Le Pen is not particularly hawkish about Russia. She doesn't want to send Russian troops there, French troops to Russia, which of course Macron has been talking about constantly. So it seems to me that what we're seeing with Le Pen and with Wilders is a heavily pro-Israel setup. Because remember, Le Pen is all about these people, especially the Islamists. I don't believe, she says, I don't believe in the Great Replacement. So we can't really be bad about all immigrants and migrants, but we have to get rid of the Islamists who will not play ball in terms of French culture. We want to get rid of burqas and things. It's very much your kind of, alt-right, Gavin McGinnis kind of take on, or your Tommy Robinson kind of take on what needs to be done here. We can all go back to Fresh Prince. I love the wide range of restaurants, but it's really the Islamists who need to be taken care of in our countries because the Jews can't feel safe. And I think where you don't see any strong statements backing out of Ukraine from somebody like Wilders or Le Pen at this time, I think it's simply because they know that they're going to have to move as a united front to try to negotiate with Russia. And so they also don't want to start saying this stuff at the background when, the Ukrainians themselves are only holding on insofar as they're able by the skin of their teeth. So it looks like the same people who brought you Tommy Robinson, and this isn't a joke. It looks like the same people who brought you Tommy Robinson brought you Geert Wilders and Le Pen. Now, I don't mean that in terms of the French electorate. I think that there are behind the scenes things going on with the war between the globalist, rainbow dildo, Trotskyite faction of the Jewish diaspora, and more on the other end, the nationalist, Zionist, right-wing, but at least certainly more conservative side of the Israelis. I think they've come to some understanding, and it centers around Biden, and it centers around the idea that you have to disconnect Iran from Russia, because if we're going to do anything that could put us into trouble with Iran, we want to make sure that we've cut a deal with Russia beforehand so that we can make it happen. And let's look at some other things in addition to Le Pen saying that, even in the old days, the Front National was always a pro-Israel party. It seems that she's willing to throw in her lot with the Israelis because they both want to see the huge Muslim population, which is really trouble in Europe, dealt with. There's also this family in France called the Klarsfeld family. These parents were so-called Nazi hunters back in the day. And their son, who I think is a lawyer or something, has recently done an appearance with Le Pen, saying that he's perfectly ready to vote with Rassemblement National, to vote for Rassemblement National in order to promote Le Pen. Now, what's interesting is in the background, though, there's this organization in France called the CRIF, which is something like the French, which is something like the French APAC. It's whatever. It's the Council for Jews in France, and their former head. He was head from 2007 to 2016. Well, wait, before I talk about this, I have to say, this was pointed out to me. Jews in France are not the same as Jews in the United States. I will say it again. Jews in France are not the same as Jews in the United States. Yes, there are the leftist pink-haired ones, but there is a solid core, and it seems to be the dominant group in France of Jews. They're Zionists and pro-Israel. And they're not going crazy. Like, look at somebody like Zemmour. And what's interesting is Zemmour seems to have been fronted, as far as I can tell, in order to have someone who seems to be further to the right than Le Pen. Whereas Le Pen has been steadily moving towards the center in order to make herself more palatable to the broader French public. And it seems to be working. And Zemmour is over here. I think that has more to do with the general program on the part of Jewish lobbies, particularly, I think you have two types. The globalist Trotskyist type of Jewish organizers and activists are perfectly willing to have ridiculous caricatures of right-wing people in order to use them to discredit the entire idea. But I think the Israeli nationalist Zionist side is very happy to have based sounding people saying all the based things. Just like in the United States and in Britain, it seems to be also highly desirable to have Indians saying all the base things that white people aren't allowed to say. I think that the Israeli activists and NGOs and left that aren't the globalist variety, the Israeli variety, they like to have people like Zemmour, so that if it really does get out of hand or it really does gain ascendancy, they have long established figures who are in a position of trust, who've been known for a long time on the right, as it were, that can help to shape that and ensure that doesn't threaten what diaspora Jews and even Israeli Zionist nationalist Jews see as their legitimate Jewish interests. So Zemmour is someone that is not backing Le Pen, and there's some weirdness going on with Marion Maréchal Le Pen, the daughter of a brother of Le Pen, who was with Zemmour's party, but she apparently defected recently back, or tried to communicate in some way to bring Zemmour's party and Le Pen's together, and that didn't work. So Zemmour kicked her out. So just something I wanted to add in. But what you have to understand is that in France, it's not like it's all Pornhub Jews. A lot of them are nationalists, Zionist nationalists. And they tend to be more right-wing and more conservative, which makes sense in a place like France, where the Muslim population is enormous, and they would have had to have made a strategic decision long ago to position themselves as they have. So coming back to CRIF, the former head of CRIF, this Jewish Council of France, he was head from 2007 to 2016. His name is Richard Prosquier. He's come out and endorsed or said that he supports Rassemblement National, Le Pen's party. So this isn't a left-wing Jew like Gabriel Attal, a more globalist sort. This is a more right-wing-ish one. And then there's another one. It gets complicated because I was trying to test my hypothesis, right? Are the Jews really coming out for Le Pen? To a certain extent, they seem to be. There's another one, but who was just pushed out as head of there was another one from 2016 to 2022 who is a Sephardic Jew. Again, not one of these Ashkenazis. The other one, Prosquier, was an Ashkenazi. Those guys are, on one hand, pro-Rassemblement National, or at least anti-Islamist. But there's a current one named Jonathan Arfi who says don't vote for the RN. So I think probably what we're seeing there is like what the Scots did when they were at war with the English. You have a situation where they're like, well, my younger son can go support the English, and I'll send my oldest son up into the Highlands so that if there's if it doesn't matter which side is dominant, my family and my fortunes will continue. I think we're seeing some of that going on, but I also think there is this fight going on between the globalist Jews and the Israeli Zionist nationalist ones. But I think because of Biden, some of that is being settled. If this hypothesis is correct, then Le Pen will come to power in the next election because everyone is tired of this en même temps business, on the one hand. On the other hand, equivocation from Macron, because Macron is understandably worried about this massive Muslim population that's going to go apeshit across France if something like Rassemblement National comes into power. You had those rappers who released their video saying that no matter what, you couldn't have Le Pen, and that we all had to stand together and vote against them. And if Le Pen does win, so this rap song goes, they need to get out in the streets with their guns. So, Macron would say we have to support Israel, and then he would say en même temps we have to support the Palestinians, and en même temps Israel October 7th was terrible, and en même temps this whole thing. And I think the Israeli Zionists have finally come to some kind of understanding with the globalist ones to say, look, I don't give a shit about the Trotskyist program. It has to be put on hold right now. And we have to shore up our positions because of what we're likely to do in the Middle East soon. So against that background, who's in charge of the EU right now? Viktor Orban. He's someone who is very pro-Israel, perfectly willing to do all kinds of business with Israel, but he's kind of pro-Russia too. I mean, he tries to keep his country afloat, and he knows Hungary is a small country. It's got limited options. It needs to keep its friends in various places. It's friends with the Chinese, tries to be economically friends with the Russians, tries to be economically getting energy from them, tries to keep its distance from the globalists at the EU. The globalists tied to the globalist Jews, but doesn't have any kind of problem with the Israeli Jews in Israel, perfectly willing to do business with them. He just visited Ukraine, didn't he? Didn't he want to hear what it was that presumably that Zelensky had to say about peace? And then we had some news articles about how Zelensky was saying, yeah, we do have to come up with some kind of peace arrangement. At the same time that he's also en même temps saying out of the other side of his mouth, there can be no surrender unless we get our borders back, or there can be no surrender. There will only be victory when we recover all Ukrainian territory. And what happened? What's his name? Sorel, a famous, you could call him right-wing, but I guess he's probably more a Nazbol guy in France. When Le Pen is trying to come to power, Sorel, who has let us say that he doesn't have the highest opinion of Jews, apparently. He was just arrested in Switzerland about a month ago for anti-Semitism, and I think carried back to France. And then what's going on in Britain? Well, the Labour Party, with Blair presumably behind the scenes, has come back into power. So the sort of time of the screw ups and the fools is over. It's the return of the Dark Lord to Britain, and behind the scenes, because why do you need to be in the foreground? It limits so much what you can do. I suspect that Blair, remember, who is a staunch ally of people like George Bush Jr., the shrub, George W., and a staunch ally of the Israelis, and he went after Iraq. You think that the Labor government is going to fail to stand by Israel with what's coming? You think there might be a reason why they would want to get competent people back into position after they let the fools make asses of themselves? I think everything that just happened with the Tory party was very much a matter of absolutely ensuring that it was difficult to imagine that there could be someone more incompetent than Liz Truss, but Sunak, so it seems like they allowed the idiots to take over in some sort of asinine saturnalia of incompetence for a time, and then just roll Labor in order to ensure that during this time of serious shit about to go down, both in Europe potentially and in the Middle East, that you had people who have their shit together. Also, I would be very interested to hear from the Britbongs, especially from AA, what Tony Blair's history is with Russia, and what Tony Blair or the Tony Blair Institute's history is with Iran, because I think that that's going to be very important. So again, Zelensky suddenly willing to negotiate, Le Pen possibly coming into power in 48 hours, or the writing being on the wall for it, Orban holding the rotating presidency to the EU and shuttling between Ukraine. And now it seems he's got a meeting coming up with Putin, in which this stuff will be able to be discussed. And this business with Jews coming out and saying that they support, many of them saying that they do support Le Pen. Well, here's the last part. Here's the last part of this picture, and I'll start to look at the chat and take questions. What's the other election that nobody's talking about? What is it? What's the other election that no one's talking about? Shall we share a screen, ladies and gentlemen? Let's share a screen. All right. Let's jump over here. Oh, God, it's going to reload this with a fucking kiss my ass. I hate this pop-up shit. What the Russia-Iran comprehensive agreement means for Western security interests. Remember, we're on the potential threshold here of Russia and Iran signing a security agreement. In many respects, this could be the coup de main that Russia has been holding in the background as a way to shut this thing down, given the war in Israel. If there's some agreement signed that basically establishes a relationship between Russia and Iran, similar to the one that we saw just now done between Russia and North Korea, that could cause real problems for whatever Netanyahu has planned. Kremlin says Russia and Iran continuing to work on cooperation pact, but the schedule may shift. Schedule may shift. Negotiations going on in the background. Talk of meetings between Russian and American intelligence officials in Baku. Yes, we're continuing to work on a cooperation pact, but the schedule may shift. It might shift. We don't know. Let's see. It's all up in the air right now. Never know what might happen. Schedule might shift. Might not have to sign an agreement like that. And you know what's weird? There was that thing with the Iranian president, happening to get killed in a helicopter crash. Wacky, crazy, the hardliner president. Okay, so what's happening now? The Iran presidential elections. Those are the other elections. Wacky, wild, crazy. Wacky, wild, crazy. Iranian elections and uh, uh, the ones that we have in France, the ones that are coming up in the US. And who are the candidates, pray tell, in these Iranian elections? A guy named Pezeshkian. Now, Iranian friends, jump in and tell me if I've got any of this wrong, because I've been having to scan all of this really quickly as the whole holy shit picture appeared. But Pezeshkian is apparently, he's a nice guy. I mean, he'd have to be a nice guy. He's a doctor. He's a heart surgeon or a cardiologist, and he's a reformer. He's a reformer. You know, he ran in previous elections, but he either didn't make it in previous elections or he was disqualified, because the Supreme Council decides who gets to run. Weird. He's running now. He's running now. And how's it going for him? It looks now, they had a runoff because he didn't have enough. It looks like he has a, is he an Armenian? Somebody just said he's an Armenian. Pezeshkian. I have learned that Yan, that Iyan, which is kind of like the Armenian version of son, or, like Gustav Son or whatever, Anderson. Pezeshkian is one of those suffixes on the name that indicates son of. Yes, it could be Armenian, and there's lots of people of Armenian descent and Armenians proper in Iran, but there is a Yan last name that's just a Persian one too. So anyway, that could be interesting because that ties into Armenia and some other things going on there. But Pezeshkian's a reformer. Weirdly, he's a reformer who just never had any success before. And now he is having success. Weird. The hardline president who was the one negotiating the security agreement with the Russians died. And now they have to have an election. And now there's going to be this runoff, which is it's happening today, ladies and gentlemen, the day before the French election. And they've got a choice. Which way? Whither? What direction? Iran? Will you be electing another hardliner who's ready to continue the program that the other one who got killed in a helicopter crash was pushing? Or is it time for the cardiologist, the reformer, who believes that they have to negotiate with the West to open things up? Ladies and gentlemen, it sounds to me very much as though what we're looking at here is the war with Hezbollah is on hold because the various Jewish interest groups have been competing up till now, and I think some high-level understanding was reached. And basically, I mean, I don't know if, Netanyahu's kind of people are in a position to say, either get your shit in order, you can sell your rainbow dildos, but, stop trying to topple me from power in Israel right now, or we'll make you an offer you can't refuse. Or they figured out a way to rejigger everything where, Larry Fink says, fuck, I don't get to make all that money from all that, Ukrainian farmland, only part of it in Galicia. And I guess it's now a no for getting energy out of the Black Sea. But we can bring Iran back into the fold in some fashion, assuming a change of leadership. We can wrap up the war in Ukraine in a way that is more acceptable to Russia in order to get them in on this deal with Iran. And remember, if Iran and Russia stabilize, China is happy as a dead pig in the sunshine in a field of shit, because now they can conduct trade, which is all they give a shit about. They do not want wars. So we may be seeing something where Iran just goes with the reformer. And it's suddenly we get to talk about how, interesting things are, changing. And, look, all these women aren't wearing face scarves anymore. And, we'll be like Saudi Arabia and everybody can drive. Maybe you'll see a new face get put on Iran in the next fucking 48 hours. And maybe we'll see Le Pen come into power, because once Iran is taken care of, if they're cut in on the deal, they've got influence over a lot of these countries. Russia has influence and relationships with lots of Muslim countries because they've still got them as legacy parts of their empire. The real problems that you're going to see are countries like Algeria being a problem if they want to be, because they have all these inroads through their gangs and intelligence connections into France. And guess who has great relationships with Algeria? Great relationships, getting better every day. Russia. If Russia gets brought online, you could control some of that North African reaction in Europe. If and by the way, there was just a visit with where is it? That's leaving aside the north-south corridor. One of these visits just included, yes, Putin, 19 hours ago, Radio Free Europe. Putin holds meetings in Tehran with Iranian and Turkish leaders, because you better believe nothing's going to happen if Erdogan and the Turks will not be cut in on the deal. But something's going on in the background. I don't know if it's going to require going in and dealing with Hezbollah, but I expect that Netanyahu is going to demand it. And you would basically see, the idea is basically this, that Jewish power players have been at odds for some time, but now they've reached a détente and a basic framework for cooperation where the globalists get to say, fine, we've got enough of them in here anyway. We pumped millions of them in under Sunak. We pumped millions more into Europe. Let's just cut it off for now, and we'll see how we can integrate, because now we've got enough to do what we want. Or maybe it goes in a further line in places like France, where Le Pen says, no, it's time for some of you, the criminals, just a few of you, to go home. But anyway, they say, we need to shut this down. We need to make sure that these populations don't raise all hell in France and across Europe, in the Netherlands, in Britain. So we're going to need to have Iran on side in some fashion, or at least disconnected from Russia. We need Russia on side, because then we can tamp down some of the stuff in North Africa, and we can calm this. And even if we do try to calm it, it's going to be a mess, which means that we need people who are at least willing to take a strong hand against so-called Islamists. Who's willing to do that? Orban, but he doesn't have a problem with it. Holding the rotating presidency right now, though. Wilders? Yeah, absolutely. Le Pen, absolutely. And we could see others. And once this changes, it'll be like, you can stay here unless you want to screw with this picture of what's going to change and develop in the Middle East. And likewise, I think that something is going to be happening with Ukraine, because I think Ukraine is part of this picture. I think that the bone that can be thrown to Putin is some resolution in Ukraine, the only one that would be sufficient for them to maybe back up a little bit from supporting Iran, or maybe Iran will get put in with the deal. But you guys get it. This is the basic picture, and it's all happening right now. Right now. So then what happens next with the United States? What happens next? Especially if the Ukraine thing gets dismantled in order to throw a bone to Russia. What happens to this president with dementia, who's allegedly with dementia, who's currently on his way out? Well, I opined 4.5 and 5 years ago, certainly as recently as 3 years ago, that there's nothing as convenient as a president who did a bunch of crooked shit and who's now going to be taken out of office and left holding the bag, who just can't seem to remember what happened. You remember Reagan? I was out of the loop on that one. Oh, well, I just can't seem to remember right now. I might have something going on with Alzheimer's. So I don't know what's going to happen. On one side, as I said, if Le Pen comes into office, I think that strengthens the idea, the ideas that I've set forth here. This isn't a specific prediction, but it's a discussion of the elements that are in play and ways that it could go. If Le Pen is not successful, then I don't think that this moves this entire picture off the table, but I think it makes it less likely. And I'm also interested again in what Britbongs, particularly people like AA, might have to say about Labour's background with Iran, Labour's background with Israel, Labour's background Blair and the Tony Blair Institute's background with Israel, with Russia, and with Iran. And that will hopefully help us to figure out, what it is that's likely to happen here. Okay, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm going to take questions now. We've got at least a half hour before I need to cut this one. I'm sorry that I was not able to look at the chat earlier, but you've all already heard how much I ramble in the first place. So, I mean, if I were looking over here trying to like read a chat and answer questions while trying to set this forth, yeah, I wouldn't be able to do it to whatever extent I even have done it thus far. So Alan Bastard says there are riots in France intimidating citizens not to vote for Le Pen. Yes, but there are also there are attacks on candidates. I talked about this earlier on. There are attacks on candidates both of Macron's party and of Rassemblement National. And the riots and protests and the rest by French standards are not that big. I think what you're going to see is people stepping up and stepping out and showing their asses if Le Pen is elected. So I'm going to light this cigarette while you guys point out things I haven't considered, point out things that I should add, things I might be wrong about, details I got wrong, things you think support what I've said, things that you think tend to contradict my view of events. Ladies and gentlemen, I open it to you. I'm going to light this cigarette, and then we'll see if we have any good questions. And for those people who think that there's something going on with Taiwan, I don't believe it for a second. At least not under Biden. I think Biden is fully. It's my speculation and my hypothesis. I don't believe that there's anything going on with Taiwan. I think that you hear about Pelosi being sent to Taiwan. She comes from a California constituency. Remember that other one? What's the other one's name? The other California senator, not Pelosi and not Boxer. Feinstein, the one who had the Chinese driver. It's fucking California, man. Chinese, Maoists, all of them are all over California. I think that all that happens is Pelosi carries a message from mainland China to Taiwan when she visits. And I don't see China needing to move on Taiwan ever. What place could be easier for China to buy and take over than Taiwan? Why would they want to attack and lose their own equipment and gear and all the beautiful infrastructure for chip production and high-speed rail that Japan has built there? Why would they want to attack? Keep sending weapons there. Fine. They're all, in the end, they're going to be China's weapons. They don't need to attack. There's no need. Taiwan is nonsense. So, kind words. Minoan is saying, Semigog looks like the heart surgeon won. Well, then you see what face the Iranian regime now wishes to present to the West. It's one minded towards reform and integration with the West. We don't need the hardliner anymore. That's the signal. That's the signal. Let's look at what happens with Le Pen tomorrow. Questions? By the way, I think I'm right. I think I'm fucking right. But we'll see. I've been wrong before. I am the eater of crow. Okay. Questions? Anyone? I mean, I could just wrap this shit up too. But I'd like to give an opportunity for my longtime subscribers to jump in here. I guess I should look over here on Twitter too, because there may have been some responses there. Let me just check. Anything? Cyberpunk Internal Affairs, by the way, in the house, producer of the lovely intro song of mine. I thank him very much for that. Any comments here? Nope. All right. What do we have here for questions? UK Tories lost a election rather than Labour winning it. Labour very lucky to win some seats. Yeah. But I want to know what Labour is up to. They're cunning as fuck. I mean, I just heard from AA that David Lammy is like being revealed as a Machiavellian playing the long game, and he's now the foreign minister. What the fuck, Lammy? Next thing you know, like Diane Abbott is gonna like put her shoes on the correct feet and leap up and start speaking Latin and levitating. The fuck? Orban announced a new alliance. This is from Tweety Bird. What is this? New alliance. Herbert Kickl, president of the Freedom Party in Austria. I think we're still waiting to see if he gets elected. Andrej Babiš or something, former PM of Czech Republic. And there's also, I think, what's his name, who was just, he's recovering from the assassination attempt in Slovakia. I can't remember which. I think he's a part of it too, or will be. No, the Austrian is the one that's probably coming in. I don't know that if things were settled. I mean, those are going to be a whole bunch of people who may absorb a Ukrainian rump state. And I'll say that, which could be very interesting. Caravaggio says, any idea what happened with Trump in Project 2025? Why did he disavow? I still haven't confirmed that. Somebody told me that his son retweeted a screenshot of it. I don't know, and it doesn't really matter. Probably because it makes it seem like he's someone else's pawn. I can easily see where Trump would say, "What, these people are claiming that they're going to staff my government and drive my policy? Fuck you! I'm in charge." Captain K, howdy, says, what do you think would happen if Russia won't negotiate with the West, given how many times they've reneged on deals? Well, it depends on whom they're negotiating with. I mean, if they're negotiating with Orban, who's always been neutral, if not, sympathetic towards Russia, which is, strange to contemplate given that he's a Hungarian, but he's not an idiot. He's quite the opposite. If he's negotiating with Orban and Le Pen, not Macron, Mr. En même temps. If he's dealing with a Labour government, not the Tory government, which is why, again, I want to hear what AA and others have to say about Blair and the Tony Blair Institute's relationships with Iran, Russia, and Israel. They wouldn't be negotiating with the same people. And that negotiation could begin with Europe, pending the arrival of some other figure in the United States. And some other figure in the United States could happen pretty damn quickly, too. And it wouldn't necessarily have to be Harris, although it stands to reason that if they want Harris in, they can put Harris in. But somehow I think it's not going to be like that. But, I've been wrong before. Minoan asks about the status of the gas fields off the Levant. Is the development on hold? I'm sure it is at the moment. I shouldn't say I'm sure, but I suspect it is, and I have not checked recently. What else here? Sonny Jim says, do you think there's a dead certain Trump win then, as AA claims? There could be, but I don't know. I mean, there's also going to be a lot of stuff opening up here because you're going to have a lot of other players. There were there had to have been big, important players. You're like Larry Fink type people who stood to gain enormously from everything that was going to happen in Ukraine, who aren't now. And this is an energy game. I'm glad, actually, that Sonny Jim brought up, no, it wasn't Sonny Jim. It was right before that. Sorry. Minoan brought up the business about the gas fields off the coast of the Levant because Israel was getting set up to pump energy into Europe. And Biden blocked it. So one of the big issues is European energy. And Biden blocked it. unless you want to buy, liquefied natural gas or route it, circuitously and pay, what amounts to a premium. But that's another interesting thing, because one of the things that Netanyahu was seeking to do and Biden blocked. I'm glad you brought that up, because not only did Biden go after Netanyahu with NGOs and all the judiciary stuff and the protests in the streets, he blocked Netanyahu's plans to turn Israel into an energy exporter, which would diversify their economy, which would put them on a much more solid footing, which would make them more secure as regards war, and I should say as regards Israeli security. Biden blocked that. Another reason why Biden needs to go, I'm sure, as far as Netanyahu is concerned. What else? Yeah, see, people talking about Jewish handlers. I don't believe the Jews are responsible for everything. I do believe that the Jews is another problem. I believe that they're enormously powerful. They comprise enormously powerful lobbies, and they wield enormous outsized influence. And I think they can generally torpedo just about anything that they don't like, and push through almost anything that they do like. But they're not the only players. They've been in alliance with the Brits since, in my view, shortly after Napoleon's defeat. Okay. Yeah, North Sea pointed out, I'd read about that. Starmer's wife, the new prime minister of Britain's wife, is Jewish, which certainly suggests that they're going to get along just fine with Israel. It's a question about the presidential debates in the U.S. and whether it was to sabotage Biden. No, the debates didn't sabotage Biden. Biden's been talking that way since 2020. As I've observed on Twitter, people accurately assessed that it's impossible for Biden to be elected. And yet he was. What changed after the debates, he wasn't sabotaged in the debates. It was the press coverage afterwards indicating, nope, now it's time to go. The order came down from on high. Biden fucking goes. Which it seems to be the case. That seems to be what is going to happen here. Again, we'll see. Why did Biden block the Minoan, I think, is asking why Biden blocked the Levantine energy development. I don't know. I do not know. I have no idea. One of the things that it would have done is it would have given, it would have been an alternative source of energy. It would have made Netanyahu more popular, and it would have given Europe a source of energy. It wouldn't have met all of Europe's energy needs, but it would have diversified their energy, which shows you that all the claims about how they were seeking for ways to diversify Europe's energy after, the Nord Stream pipeline was destroyed by who, it's all bullshit. It's all bullshit. Everything Biden did seemed to be to destroy Europe's economy. So I'm not ruling out that these two factions, that the ones that I'm hypothesizing are on the way out, and the new arrangement that I'm hypothesizing is on the way in. I'm not arguing that they aren't two sides of the same coin. They may very well be. But the beauty of dialectics is that it's not so much about having to plan it in advance. It's knowing that there will be tensions and counter pressures that must be accommodated in this constant swirl of the dialectic, which is why all the heavy communists almost worship the dialectic and studied it as this yin yang at the heart of materialist philosophy. Yeah, maybe BlackRock Caravaggio is saying that BlackRock's Larry Fink and Tony Blair, and by extension Sir Keir, are super tight. Fink is going to invest massively in the British tech sector with Blair running the fund. Maybe it's time for a different bone to be thrown to Fink. I mean, it's not like he can't make money elsewhere, and there will be ways to make money on his investments thus far, even if the situation in Ukraine changes radically. Ryan 218 notes that a lot of the gas Israel is claiming in the Med belongs to Lebanon, though. Well, yes and no. There are disputes about overlapping claims in southern Lebanon, which is an area where Israel may very soon be seizing territory, which will just give them larger gas holdings. But the Goliath field and some others are large, and Israel also is in a situation with its technical capacity to act as to crack it, to refine it. And before Biden shut it down, it wasn't just development of those fields, further development of those fields. It was putting pipelines in that would run that gas through some route, either to Cyprus and then on to Crete, or from Crete and then on to Greece and Italy. So it may be that that really Hezbollah needs to be taken care of so that they can get southern Lebanon, which could conceivably eventually stabilize Lebanon, because that's the stronghold of Hezbollah in the south. You could get a different government in the north. Remember, Lebanon has basically been in the thumbscrews. It's been locked in an Iron Maiden, economically, logistically, financially, forever. It's been absolutely destroyed. Up until the 70s, it was like the Riviera and a banking sector of the Middle East, and it was absolutely shattered and destroyed, in large part by Israel, in order to not have a powerful neighbor on their northern flank. And it may be that they could basically unfreeze it. Economically, it's been, I mean, people are fucked in Lebanon right now. And we may see, what's his name? What was the name of that guy who worked for the huge automotive conglomerates, who escaped from Japan in a road case for a band and was smuggled into Lebanon, who's been kept there as a technocrat to run things. And I assumed he was just put on the back burner until all of that settled. We may see him brought to the fore again. So something to consider. Speedrunner says, well, no, he's asking, let's see, talking about something else. Yep, pointed out, Jewish El Presidente in Mexico also. Yep. Could be interesting. Could be interesting. All right, well, I've laid out the gist of it. I think that is the basic idea. Let me see if I can find some way to summarize it. I don't know if it's a dialectical flip-flop, but the nature of dialectics itself is that even conflicting forces and parties, when understood and turned properly with dialectical cunning, become complementary. So whether or not you actually have two truly at odds groups or constellations of factions, and one is on the way out and one is on the way in, or if it was only seemingly the case and idiots like Macron and Schultz and Baerbock and Biden and Blinken and the rest were just brought in to oversee a phase that everybody knew was going to stink like dog shit later. So they wanted to make sure that they can just sort of cut it off and move it over and say, that wasn't us. Doesn't matter which way, one way or another. I think that's what we're seeing. And I think Israel wants to resolve the shit with Hamas. And it wants to resolve the shit with Hezbollah. But in order to do it, there's going to be enormous Muslim backlash, particularly in Europe, particularly in France, but also in places like Germany and in the Netherlands. But if Iran can be brought on side, and Turkey too, and Russia, and by extension through Russia, Algeria, then a lot of that can be blunted, because you wouldn't have Turkish and Algerian and Iranian intelligence services agitating these populations. And if at the same time you put in politicians like Le Pen, who says, oh, there's no such thing as the Great Replacement, we just need to take care of Islamists, right? As I said, the same people who brought you Tommy Robinson. then you will at least have people on the ground ready to deal with the possible explosions of popular outrage on the part of Muslims and deport a bunch of them. At which point, Israel can do what it needs to do. Probably it would be better if there's a reformer in office who apparently was just elected by coincidence in Iran after the other one, the hardliner, just happened to, by coincidence, get killed in a helicopter crash. It'd be great if they can bring Iran on side, but if they can't, it will be enough if they can bring Turkey and Russia on side. And at a minimum, either separate Iran from Hezbollah, but they got to pay. We got to trade. Hey, you fella give me fella, I fella give you fella, me fella give you fella, right? They got to trade. So at a minimum, they need to arrange things so that Russia is not helping Iran and that Turkey is on side. If that doesn't work, then they need to make well, at minimum, they need to have that. And they also would like to bring Iran on side. But if they can't even do that, then they at least need to make sure that Russia could exercise some control over Iran and let the shit fold with Hezbollah. And then Israel would be, what's his name? Netanyahu would be able to declare victory and deal with some of the overlapping claims for offshore energy in the area disputed between Lebanon and Israel. And if Trump comes back into office, remember, he's got nice Jerusalem stone at the American embassy in Israel. I love it that he put in, you know, he's perfectly willing to make arrangements. I mean, why wouldn't he be willing to make arrangements? So you could see some things change. It's also worth noting a last little piece that I believe that guy, Masoud Pezeshkian in Iran, born in Mahabad in 1954 to an Iranian Azerbaijani father who was born in Qasr-e-Shirin, and an Iranian Kurdish mother. I expect that we are shortly going to see something going on with the Kurds. If this shit is all going to get worked out, then Syria is going to get worked out, Russia's going to get worked out, Iran's going to get worked out, the Kurds are going to get worked out. There's going to be a lot of shit worked out. Because remember, the problems in the Middle East are because we froze it. Israel froze it. The US froze it. We are the ones who have kept it from reaching some kind of equilibrium. Now there's a possibility that it could, but there's going to be some kind of mess in the meantime. So yeah, there it is, ladies and gentlemen. This evening, I'm almost certainly going to be rolling over to talk to John D on his excellent cocktail hour. So I'll be doing that over on X. You guys should definitely follow me over on X, but don't expect any great insights from me other than occasional arguable ones, because mostly I just drink old fashions and I blather with my friends over there. And I do see one last thing. Oliver is overly optimistic. Yeah, maybe. And I'm certainly not saying, I wouldn't say that this is optimism, because Hamas will be crushed. The Palestinians are going to be dealt with in a way that, well, I don't care about them though. Iran may be slapped in the face and at least pushed back, but I think there's going to be a deal made. The Iranians said, well, what can we give you? Well, we can give you a headache. Look at these missiles, right? Give us something. We're going to have to give something to Russia in terms of Ukraine. And that's going to change all the power structure in Europe that backed that Ukrainian war, if it happens how I said. But I'm not saying that like this is cause for optimism. Nothing's going to be fixed. Nothing's going to be good. The same basic group of assholes just is going to be in charge. There just will have been the removal of the particularly egregious incompetence. I'm sorry, there will be removal of particularly egregious incompetence. So yeah, and the best idea is just that you'll have some anti-Islamist Wilders and Le Pen type people who were really just going to deport the more nasty of the repeat offenders. Like, they might do something if a priest gets their head cut off, but they're not going to round people up in the streets and move them out. But we'll see, because there's likely to be great upheaval and agitation. Anyway, you're going to get me speculating again down different paths. I've already covered way too much on this one. It's all speculation. It's all hypothesis. I love the nation of Israel. I fully support them. I love the Palestinians. I love everyone. I love transsexuals. I love the COVID vaccine. I'm all for those things. Salute the rainbow flag. Keep yourselves safe, ladies and gentlemen. I love you all. And yeah, I'm Semiagog, and I am out.